The galaxy is dying. Not with a bang, not even a whimper, just a slow, drawn-out expiration. I've seen stars flicker and fade, not from age but from a sort of cosmic fatigue, as if they are tired of burning. I see it in every jump through the void, every scan of another dead system. It's in the scrap metal prices, the cost of untainted water, the haunted look in the eyes of every spacer I meet. They all know it, even if they don't say it out loud. We're living on borrowed time, scavenging the remnants of a galaxy that's already given up the ghost. My boots, scuffed and magnetic-soled, adhered to the deck plates of the Dark Star. The deck vibrated beneath my feet. It wasn't a concerning vibration. It was the ship's engine, a second-hand, modified fusion drive. My hand, the organic one, ran along the durasteel of the corridor bulkhead. The other hand, a mess of articulated synth skin and servo-assisted joints, flexed rhythmically, a nervous tick I couldn't shake. The corridor's light panels cast my reflection back at me, a face etched with too many hard years, framed by close-cropped greying hair. My right eye, a synthetic replacement, caught the light, reflecting with a precise geometric intensity. The other, my own, was bloodshot, tired. They call it the Void Choir. Sounds almost religious, doesn't it? Poetic even. It's anything but. I've seen what it does, up close and personal. Imagine a cancer, but instead of just cells, it consumes everything. Flesh, bone, metal, even energy. It spreads through contact, a touch, a mere scratch enough to start the process. It rewrites you, molecule by molecule, until you're just another voice in its chorus. A chorus of pain, of loss, of a billion individual consciousnesses twisted into a single, agonizing song. It happened 10 years ago. 10 years since the Screaming Eagles, my unit, answered a distress call from a research vessel near the Galactic rim. 10 years since we found that ship adrift, its hull covered in a writhing black tar-like mass. 10 years since they started screaming, my crew, my friends. I can still hear them, you know? Not literally, not anymore, but the memory is burned into my brain, as real as the metal in my arm. Their faces contorted in agony as that stuff consumed them. I fought, of course. We all did. But it was like trying to fight smoke. It just got inside you, around you, through you. I was the only one who got out. Why? Pure dumb luck? A genetic fluke? Maybe my modifications interfered with the assimilation process. I don't know. And I've long stopped trying to figure it out. The doctors, the ones who weren't running scared or already part of the choir, they poked and prodded, ran their scans. They found nothing definitive. I was just different. They called it immunity. I call it a curse. It is a constant, grating awareness, a deep-seated unease that sets me apart. I spat, a glob of saliva hitting the deck with a soft smack. I kicked a loose bolt across the floor. It clattered as it bounced off a stanchion. My quarters are a mess, clothes strewn across the bunk, empty ration packets, bottles. I don't bother cleaning anymore. What's the point? The galaxy's a mess, my life's a mess. Why should my room be any different? This existence is held together by caffeine, cheap synth alcohol, and whatever modifications I can afford. I've got reinforced bones, enhanced reflexes, a neural interface that lets me jack into most systems, and the aforementioned eye that can see into the infrared and ultraviolet spectrums. All top-of-the-line stuff back in the day. Now it is just another layer of scar tissue, another reminder of a life I can't escape. The comm unit on the wall beeped insistently, its red light flashing. A new job, probably some lowlife needing someone or something hauled across the void. The usual. I reached out, my metal fingers tapping the activation stud. A gruff voice, distorted by static, filled the room. "Trace, got a job for you. High-value target. Retrieval. Clients paying top credits. You interested?" It was Duster, my usual contact. A fat, sweaty man who ran a black market operation out of a dilapidated space station called The Wheel. I'd done a few jobs for him before. Nothing special. But the mention of high value and top credits piqued my interest. Credits meant fuel, repairs, maybe even an upgrade or two. "Send me the details," I replied. The data packet arrived a moment later, displayed on a cracked screen above the comm unit. It was a profile. Dr. Damon Vane. Renowned xenobiologist before the choir. Now, just another missing person. Last seen near the Ashen Reaches system, a sector known for fringe colonies and increasingly cult activity. The client was anonymous, of course, they always were. But the payout was substantial, enough to keep me flying for a year, maybe two. And there was a bonus, a hefty one for live retrieval. This had bad news written all over it. But what did I have to lose? A quiet death in my bunk. A slow fade into nothingness like the rest of the galaxy. At least this way there would be a purpose, however brief, however dangerous. Besides, something about Vane's profile, the intensity in his eyes in the provided image, resonated with something deep within me. A shared understanding, perhaps. Or something darker. I ran a diagnostic on the dark star. The engines were running hot, as usual. My fuel efficiency was half of what it should be. The ship needed an overhaul, but that would have to wait. I checked the weapon systems and charged the Ripper, running my hand over the smooth metal of its housing on my forearm. The Ripper is a retractable, high-energy blade, my go-to for close-quarters combat. The deployment mechanism engaged with an almost silent click. The contained plasma blade, extending a meter when deployed, is seamlessly integrated into the cybernetics on my forearm, its activation as instinctive as flexing a finger. An efficient tool for a brutal galaxy, it is my constant companion, a silent promise of violence always at the ready. It produces an almost a soft snap as it extends, like the hiss of escaping gas. The wheel was a chaotic mess of mismatched modules and fluctuating lights, a reflection of the slow decay that gripped the galaxy. Docking clamps engaged, the ship coming to a halt. I grabbed a worn satchel containing a few essentials, a medkit, a coil of high tensile wire, a battered flask, and headed out. The station's gravity was fluctuating between near zero and a bone-jarring 1.5 Gs. Corridors were cramped, filled with the stench of stale air, unwashed bodies, and desperation. I saw a group of spacers huddled around a screen, their faces illuminated by the grim newsfeed. Another colony lost to the choir. Another desperate plea for help unanswered. Duster was waiting for me in his usual booth at the back of the Rusty Mug, a dive bar that had seen better days, like every other place. He was a mountain of a man, his multiple chins wobbling as he chewed on a nutrient stick. "Trace, my friend," he boomed, his voice echoing through the near-empty bar. "You got my message? Good, good." He gestured to a seat across from him. I sat down, the worn cushions sighing beneath my weight. "The Vane job," I said, cutting to the chase. "What's the real story?" Duster leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial rasp. "This ain't just some missing scientist, Trace. Rumor has it Vane was onto something big, something about the choir, something they don't want anyone to know." He paused for effect, his eyes darting around the room. "They say he joined up with some cult, a bunch of crazies who worship the damn choir. They call themselves the Harmonious Accord." The Harmonious Accord. I'd heard whispers of them before, fanatics who believed the choir was some kind of divine entity, a path to a higher plane of existence. "And the client?" I asked. "Who are they?" Duster shrugged. "Don't know, don't care, they're paying and that's all that matters. But they want Vane alive. That's important. They think he holds the key to understanding the choir, maybe even controlling it." He chuckled, a dry, wheezing sound. "Imagine that. Controlling the damn choir." My mind was already racing, piecing together the fragments of information. A missing scientist, a fanatical cult, a mysterious client, and a hefty paycheck. It was a recipe for disaster. But it was also a chance, maybe the only one I'd ever get, to finally understand what happened to me, to find out why I was immune. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. I'll take the job, but I need more information. Coordinates, access codes, anything you can get me on Vane and this harmonious accord." Duster grinned, a greasy, unsettling expression. "I knew you'd see it my way. I'll send everything to your ship. Just be careful, Trace. These aren't your average spacers. They're touched, if you know what I mean." He tapped his temple with a thick finger. I nodded, already heading towards the airlock. As I walked away, I heard Duster call out after me. "And Trace, bring me back a souvenir, eh? Something from the choir. I've got a collector who's willing to pay a pretty penny for a piece of the action." I didn't respond. I just kept walking, the weight of the job, the weight of my past, pressing down on me like the crushing gravity of a dying star. The Ripper felt heavy on my arm, a tangible extension of the darkness that clung to me, a darkness that mirrored the void stretching out before me. The Ashen Reaches system awaited, and with it the harmonious accord, Dr. Vane, and the terrifying truth behind the song of the Void Choir. The galaxy was dying, and I, a ghost in its fading light, was about to dance with the spectre of its demise. The Ashen Reaches system was a graveyard of broken planets and shattered moons, a relic of some ancient cataclysm predating even the Void Choir. My ship sliced through the rubble field, her proximity alarms chirping. The readout on the navigation console identified the third moon of the gas giant Ashen Reaches 4 as my destination, an airless rock designated as the Anvil, now the unlikely sanctuary of the harmonious accord. Landing was like descending into a cratered skull. The surface was a mosaic of rock formations and impact scars, bathed in a blue-white luminescence of the gas giant that loomed large in the sky. The research facility, according to Duster's data, was nestled within a network of lava tubes beneath the surface. A single reinforced airlock, barely visible against the dark rock, marked the entrance. I secured the Dark Star behind a ridge of obsidian-like rock, engaging the landing struts and powering down the main systems. I geared up meticulously, checking the seals on my pressure suit, the charge on my pulse rifle, and the deployment mechanism of the Ripper on my forearm. I went over the data packet Duster had sent me one last time. It detailed the facility's original layout, a geothermal research station, and what little was known about the Harmonious Accord's modifications. It appeared they had expanded the lower levels, creating a series of interconnected chambers and tunnels, the purpose of which remained unknown. The data ended with a warning. Cult members exhibit unpredictable behavior. Extreme caution advised. The airlock door was thick, designed to withstand meteor impacts and the extreme temperature fluctuations of the moon's surface. I bypassed the external controls, my neural interface seamlessly connecting with the outdated security system. The inner door slid open, revealing a dimly lit antechamber. Gravity was lower than standard, giving my movements a slight, unsettling buoyancy. I moved through the facility, pulse rifle held ready. The original sections were utilitarian, with narrow corridors and cramped workspaces, now eerily silent. Datapads lay scattered on desks, covered in a fine layer of dust. Scrawled on a wall, in what looked like dried blood, was a single chilling phrase: "The song cleanses." As I descended deeper, the facility transformed. The functional architecture gave way to something more organic, more disturbing. The walls were lined with a strange, chitinous material, the color of dried blood. Symbols, matching those in Vane's research data, were carved into the surface, forming complex, non-repeating patterns. I reached a large cavern, the heart of the cult's modified section. In the center stood the resonator, a towering structure of metal and organic matter, vaguely spherical, its surface a network of cables and veins. It was a grotesque parody of a scientific instrument, a fusion of technology and the Void Choir's own biology. It stood about 20 feet tall, its base embedded in the cavern floor. Its metallic components were a dull, tarnished silver, while the organic parts were a deep crimson color. The veins that covered its surface were not uniform. Some were thick and bulging, while others were thin and thread-like, creating an unsettling, asymmetrical pattern. These veins carried a thick, luminescent fluid that moved rhythmically, like blood through arteries. Around the resonator, the cultists gathered. Dozens of them, their bodies emaciated, their eyes wide and unblinking, fixated on the device. They wore tattered lab coats and jumpsuits, adorned with the same unsettling symbols I'd seen on the walls. They began to sing. It wasn't the deafening, soul-wrenching chorus of the fully assimilated. This was different. A low, rhythmic chanting. A discordant harmony that vibrated in my bones. It wasn't just sound. It was a physical sensation, a pressure that pushed and pulled at me, threatening to unravel my thoughts, my sense of self. Each cultist's voice was distinct, yet they blended together in a way that was both harmonious and deeply unsettling. The sound was not static. It ebbed and flowed, changing in intensity and pitch. At times, it was a low drone, like the sound of a distant massive engine. At other times, it rose to a higher pitch, a chorus of individual voices that seemed to be crying out in either pain or ecstasy, or perhaps both. Hidden behind a protruding section of the resonator, I saw Dr. Damon Vane. He stood apart from the others, conducting their song with slow movements of his hands. He was a withered husk of a man, his skin pale and translucent. He was the image from the data file, only far worse in person. I crept closer, using the shadows cast by the resonator for cover. Vane was muttering to himself, his voice barely audible above the chanting. I caught snatches of his words: convergence, transcendence, the great harmony. He was lost, completely consumed by his delusion. "Dr. Vane," I called out. He turned, his focus landing on me. His eyes, once filled with scientific curiosity, now held a terrifying emptiness, a void that mirrored the entity he worshipped. "You are the anomaly," he said, his voice a dry, rasping sound. It was not a question but a statement. Each word was enunciated with an eerie calmness, devoid of any inflection or emotion, making the statement even more unsettling. The one who resists, the one who is different. His head tilted slightly, like a bird studying its prey. His movements were slow, adding to the unsettling atmosphere. "I'm here to take you back," I said. "Your work is needed." Vane let out a dry laugh. "Back? There is no back. There is only the song that cleanses, the song that unites." He gestured towards the chanting cultists. "They understand. They have embraced the truth. They're lost," I countered. "They've given up their minds, their bodies, to that thing." I pointed at the resonator. "They have ascended," Vane corrected, his voice taking on a fervent intensity. "They have transcended the limitations of their individual existence. And you, anomaly, you are the key." He raised his hands, and the chanting intensified. I felt a strange pull, a yearning to join the chorus, to surrender to the song. "Your immunity," Vane rasped. "It is not what you think. It is a tether, a connection. You are bound to the choir, closer than any of us." His eyes gleamed with mad certainty. "You will be the vessel, the conduit. You will bring the song to the rest of the galaxy." Training took over. Years of fighting, surviving, kicked in. I raised my pulse rifle, my finger tightening on the trigger, and fired a burst at Vane. He moved with surprising speed, dodging the energy bolts. He was faster, stronger than he looked. The cultists, startled by the sudden violence, turned towards me, their chanting faltering. Their eyes, once vacant, now burned with rage. I dropped into a combat stance and activated the Ripper. The energy blade extended from its housing on my forearm with an almost inaudible click, casting a blue-white light across the cavern. The contained plasma, 3 feet long, emitted heat waves that distorted the air. It was time to dance. The first cultist was on me in an instant, his hands outstretched, fingers gnarled and sharp. I sidestepped his attack and brought the Ripper up in a swift arc. The blade sliced through his torso, meeting little resistance. The contained plasma cauterized the wound instantly, preventing any blood spatter. There was a brief hiss as the blade passed through the air, followed by a thud as the bisected body fell to the ground. Another cultist attacked, this one wielding a cryoscalpel, its blade shimmering with a dangerous, near-invisible chill. It was a tool designed for delicate surgical procedures, now repurposed for violence. I parried his blow with my rifle, the scalpel's edge scraping against the durasteel with a high-pitched shriek, leaving a trail of frozen condensation in the air. The impact jarred my arm, the sudden cold numbing my fingers. Then I lunged forward, the Ripper leading the way. The blade sliced through his arm, severing it cleanly at the elbow. The scalpel clattered to the floor, its blade still radiating an icy mist. More cultists closed in. They were stronger, faster than their emaciated bodies suggested, enhanced by the resonator's proximity. I fought back, my movements precise and economical, each block, parry and thrust designed to maximize damage while conserving energy. The Ripper extended and retracted, a controlled extension of my arm, meeting flesh and bone with deadly efficiency. I pivoted and shifted, using their momentum against them, a grim dance of survival in the heart of the cavern. The Ripper sang its own song, a song of violence and survival. Still, they came. I was forced to use my rifle, firing short, controlled bursts. The energy bolts found their mark, punching holes through flesh and bone. The cultists fell, their bodies twitching on the ground. But the fallen were quickly replaced by others, stepping over the twitching bodies of their comrades without hesitation. Their devotion was absolute, a terrifying indifference to pain, fear, or death itself. I was losing ground, forced back towards the cavern wall. My cybernetics were taking a beating, my organic parts screaming in protest. I was tiring. I had to end this and fast. I needed to reach the resonator. It was the source of their power, their unity. Destroy it and I might have a chance. I just needed to get past Vane. He stood before the resonator, his arms outstretched, his eyes closed, chanting along with his followers. He was the conductor of this macabre orchestra, the linchpin of their twisted faith. He was the key. With a roar, I charged, the Ripper held high. Vane opened his eyes, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. He raised his hands as if to ward off my attack. It was too late. The Ripper connected, slicing through his outstretched arm, continuing through his torso. A diagonal cut, a fatal blow. A terrible gurgling sound escaped his lips as he crumpled to the ground, his body convulsing. The chanting stopped abruptly, replaced by a stunned silence. The cultists looked around, their eyes wide with confusion and fear. The spell was broken. Their connection to the choir, to their twisted purpose, severed. But the resonator remained active. It was still a threat, a beacon to the void choir. I had to destroy it. I raised my pulse rifle, aiming at the device's core, but a new sound, a chorus of screeches, stopped me. Emerging from the tunnels that led deeper into the moon were more cultists. Not just any cultists. These were different, larger. Their bodies were fused with technology, a grotesque combination of flesh and metal. They were the results of Vane's experiments, his attempts to enhance, accelerate, and control the assimilation process. The creatures were a horrifying sight, their bodies a patchwork of human flesh and metallic components. Wires snaked in and out of their skin, connecting to crude implants and prosthetics. They were faster, stronger than the other cultists, and their movements were more coordinated, more purposeful. They were living weapons, forged in the crucible of Vane's madness. The Void Choir's influence was stronger in them, their bodies warped and twisted by the entity's power. I was trapped. The entrance to the lava tubes was blocked by the onrushing creatures, and behind me, the resonator hummed, a grotesque monument to a twisted faith. My pulse rifle was running low on energy, the display flashing a warning. The Ripper, still extended, was my only other option. A melee weapon against a horde. Not ideal, but I'd faced worse odds. The creatures were on me in seconds. The first, a hulking mass of muscle and machinery, swung a heavy piston-driven arm. I ducked under the blow, the metal fist smashing into the rock wall, sending shards everywhere. I retaliated, the Ripper a blur of blue-white energy. It sliced through the creature's arm, severing wires and hydraulic lines. It roared, a sound that was both human and machine, and staggered back. It tried to attack again but stumbled, its legs, a mix of organic and synthetic components, failing to respond properly. The disruption to its internal systems was causing it to malfunction. It was a design flaw, a weakness in Vane's attempt to control the assimilation process. Another creature, this one with multiple spider-like limbs, scuttled towards me, its movements quick and unpredictable. I fired a short burst from my pulse rifle, hitting it in the chest. The energy bolts burned through its flesh, causing it to screech in pain. But it kept coming. I switched back to the Ripper, parrying its attacks, the energy blade slicing through its limbs. The creature, despite its injuries, continued to fight with ferocity. Its movements, though, were becoming increasingly uncoordinated. Severing multiple limbs was disrupting its balance and motor control. It was like fighting a broken machine that refused to shut down. More creatures joined the fray. I fought back, the Ripper a deadly extension of my will. I was forced to rely on my instincts, my training, my years of experience fighting for survival in a galaxy gone mad. I targeted their joints, their exposed wires, their crude implants. I aimed for weak points in their armor, areas where the metal was thin or corroded. My goal was not just to kill them, but to disable them, to exploit the flaws in their design. They were strong, fast, but they were also unstable. Each successful strike, each severed limb, each disrupted system was a small victory. I was taking hits too. A glancing blow from a metal fist sent me sprawling. Another creature slammed into me, its claws tearing at my suit. My enhanced strength and reflexes were the only things keeping me alive. But I was tiring, my movements becoming sluggish. My cybernetics were overloaded, warning lights flashing in my augmented vision. I needed a new tactic. Fighting them head-on was a losing battle. I needed to use the environment to turn their strength against them. I needed to think like an engineer, not a soldier. I backed towards the resonator, drawing the creatures closer to the device. It was designed to amplify the Void Choir's signal, to enhance the assimilation process. But what if that energy could be redirected, disrupted? As a creature charged, I rolled aside, narrowly avoiding its attack. I slammed my fist into one of the resonator's external nodes. Sparks flew, and the creature recoiled. It was working. The resonator's energy, designed to facilitate assimilation, was disrupting the creature's already unstable systems. They were being torn apart from the inside. The energy was interfering with the delicate balance between their organic and synthetic components, causing their systems to malfunction. It was like a virus attacking their already compromised immune systems. I continued my desperate dance, luring the creatures closer to the resonator, using its energy field as a weapon. I goaded them into attacking, then used their momentum to send them crashing into the device. Each impact caused a surge of energy, further disrupting their systems. I was using their own strength, their own connection to the Void Choir, against them. One by one, the creatures fell. Their movements became increasingly uncoordinated, their attacks weaker, more desperate. They were breaking down, their bodies unable to withstand the conflicting energies tearing them apart. Finally, only one remained, a hulking monstrosity with a single red optical sensor. It was the most heavily modified of the creatures, its body almost entirely encased in metal. It was Vane's masterpiece, his ultimate weapon. It charged, its movement surprisingly fast for its size. I sidestepped its attack and brought the Ripper up, slicing through one of its legs. It stumbled but didn't fall. It turned, its single eye fixated on me, and let out a roar. It was a sound of pure rage, of a creature that knew it was about to die. It was a sound of defiance, of a refusal to surrender, even in the face of oblivion. It charged again, and this time I was ready. I dropped to the ground, sliding between its legs. As it passed over me, I plunged the Ripper upwards, deep into its underbelly. The energy blade sliced through metal and flesh, severing vital systems. The creature collapsed, its body convulsing. Its single eye flickered, then went dark. It was over. The creatures were defeated, their threat extinguished. Vane was dead, his twisted vision of the future dying with him. The cultists, freed from the resonator's influence, were scattered, disoriented, their fanaticism replaced by fear and confusion. The Ripper retracted with a soft click back into my forearm housing. I had survived. I had stopped Vane, prevented his plan from spreading. But the Void Choir remained, a vast, silent threat lurking at the edge of the galaxy. My actions, my survival, felt insignificant in the face of such cosmic horror. I looked around the cavern, at the fallen creatures, at the deactivated resonator, at the scattered cultists. I had won this battle, but the war was far from over. The galaxy was still dying. The Void Choir's song still echoed through the void. I made my way back to the Dark Star. I left the cultists to their fate. They were no longer a threat. They were just lost souls, victims of a madness that had consumed their world. I had a job to finish, a client to report to. I initiated the launch sequence, the ship coming to life around me. As the Dark Star ascended from the moon's surface, I took one last look at the landscape below. The research facility, the site of so much horror, was now just another scar on a dying world. Back in the void, hurtling through the expanse, I contacted the anonymous client. I reported Vane's death, the destruction of the resonator, and the dispersal of the cult. I made no mention of the creatures, of Vane's experiments. That knowledge was too dangerous, too easily weaponized. The client's response was brief. Payment will be transferred to your account. Your services are no longer required. The connection was terminated. I was alone again, adrift in the void, with nothing but the ghosts of my past and the uncertainty of the future for company. The payment arrived, a substantial sum, enough to keep me going for a while. But it brought no satisfaction, no sense of accomplishment. I set a course for the nearest space station, a haven of sorts in the vast emptiness. I needed repairs, fuel, and maybe a stiff drink. I needed to forget, even if just for a little while, the horrors I had witnessed, the truth I had uncovered. I couldn't help but wonder if resistance was ultimately futile, if the galaxy was destined to fall silent, consumed by the void, and if all our struggles, all our triumphs, were nothing more than fleeting notes in a dirge of cosmic proportions. The universe, after all, was under no obligation to make sense to us. It was under no obligation to play by our rules, to conform to our hopes and dreams. I took a swig from my battered flask, the cheap synth alcohol burning my throat. I was alive. But for how long? And to what end? In this dying galaxy under the shadow of the Void Choir, those were questions I no longer had answers to. I closed my eyes, my metal hand resting on the cold steel of the control panel, and let the darkness take me.